The East African tradition of the Maasai tribe is to greet one another with the words Kasirian Ngera, which is Swahili for, so how are the children? In that community, the well-being of their children is the highest priority. If you are interested in participating in thought-provoking conversations about the well-being of children and families, please tune in every Wednesday at 3 p.m. to Fresh Start Today on 860 AM WNOV. Together, we can save our children.
Good afternoon. You're listening to Fresh Start Today with your hosts, Jermaine Reed and Sean Roby. And we have in the studio with us some great people and online guests. We have the infamous Dr. Ramel Smith, the blacksmith. Good afternoon, Dr. Smith.
What's going on?
Man, I'm so excited to have you in the studio today.
Hey, man, it's good to be back home.
It's been a minute, but you're looking good, looking well.
Yeah, we ready.
Okay, great. And then we also have Diane Williams. She's a young mother whose child has been in the system for some time, and we're going to be talking a little bit about her story, as well as we have Mary Jackson on the phone, who is a grandmother who adopted her grandchildren. So we're going to talk about what that adoption journey was like for her and for many other foster parents who are in this community. So thank you for tuning in to Fresh Start Today. Again, our topic is the relationship between grandparents and child welfare. We began this conversation last week with the beautiful attorney Sunshine, Tarina Franklin, and co-host Sean Roby did a marvelous job last week. Thank you for holding it down. We're going to get into a couple community announcements before we jump off into this conversation. One is June is Men's Health Month. Health is really important, and so there's a lot of activities I'm sure that was going on this month. Hopefully you've been able to participate in them, but hopefully making health a value, your health a value in your life. Taking care of yourself, going to the doctor, getting those screens, prostate screens if you're over 40 years old, and just some of those mental wellness pieces. What can we men do to keep ourselves, in shape mentally, Dr. Smith?
The first thing what we got to do is what you just said. It's like talk about it, and once you understand that it's a Men's Wellness Month, do something about it. Everybody has something that's different for them, but what you want to do is always be around like-minded people who are doing positive things, just bringing positivity into your life, having you do the right things. We got to make sure, even though we don't like to, man, we got to go to the doctor, get those checkups. We got to make sure we're eating right. We all in here drinking water right now, putting that good stuff in our system, exercise and eating right, getting proper sleep. Those are the quickest things. And I'm going to tell you, there's nothing that beats love. So if you got somebody in your life who loves you, give them a hug, let them know that's the best medicine in the world.
Self-care is the best care. So that sounds great. Thanks a lot for giving those valuable words of inspiration and wisdom to us about taking care of ourselves, men, because you can't, take care of your children if you're not well. So we need you to take care of yourself. Then what else is going on here? If you are interested in becoming a culturally competent, responsive, nurturing foster parent, always feel free to give Fresh Start Family Services a call at 414-351-1100. Or if you have any other questions related to foster care, give us a call, and we'll be sure to, give you as much support as we can. Now, listen, this is a very sensitive topic, and we certainly want folks in the community who are supportive of the conversation. Maybe they've had some experiences with child welfare that you can offer some advice or some guidance or, some resources to our guests on the show today. Please give us a call at 414-444-5250. Now, I have a disclaimer here. I want to say this. We're not giving any advice out. We're not diagnosing anybody on the show. We're not practicing. I'm not practicing behavioral health or legal services. That's not me. That's not my area, nor are anybody that's associated with my organization that's doing that. But if you feel after listening to this conversation that you have additional questions, certainly feel free to talk to your physician, an attorney, or a behavioral health specialist for ongoing support. All right, so we're talking about relationship between grandparents and child welfare. Now, in child welfare, we do a lot of talking about the importance of keeping families together. There is federal law that is intended to guide child welfare policies and practice that stress the value in promoting the best interests of children by maintaining healthy connections to their families, their communities, their culture. Unfortunately, in some cases, just in some cases, not in all cases, in some cases, this is just not happening. While many states like Wisconsin are doing a much better job at maintaining sibling placement, grandparents in some instances are having major issues with child welfare systems, not just in Wisconsin, but in Illinois, in Philadelphia, in New York, just all across North America. And so we're going to talk today with two families who have similar stories, and hopefully as a community, we can be supportive of one another. And maybe there is a mother or grandparent or grandfather that's listening to this show today who will get some inspiration or some guidance around what they can do if they are dealing with this situation. Because one thing is for sure, you're not alone. So for those who are listening, if you want to tune into 414, if you want to call in, you can call 414-444-5250 quarter after the hour. Mary Jackson, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
It's a pleasure talking to you, Mary. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Okay. Now, you probably know this. Part of the focus of this program, we want our audience to understand that federal law gives placement preference to families of children in foster care. Hopefully, when talking with you, we'll be able to talk about what is the definition of relatives and how that can vary from one state to the next state. But something that you and Diane Williams in the studio can really offer us today is giving us some advice on some guidance or understanding of what your journey was like in dealing with child welfare, and how did you cope with dealing? How did you handle day-to-day living having to engage or encounter child welfare? But you know what? We also want to talk about what can grandparents do when they are being overlooked or mistreated or mishandled, what they perceive to be mistreatment by the system. So again, my guests are Mary Jackson, Diane Williams, Dr. Ramel Smith, Sean Roby, co-host. So, Mary, can you tell me a little bit about your story, who you are, and what was going on?
Yes, my name is Mary Jackson. I'm a grandmother of 8. Of that 8, 4 was put into the system. I'm locally from Milwaukee.
Okay. So you're a grandmother of 8, and how many children do you have?
I have 2.
You have 2. Okay. So you have 2 children, you have 8 grandchildren, and you're a native of Milwaukee. So when you dealt with child welfare, was that something that was local or in a different state?
It was local.
So it was here in Milwaukee. Okay.
Yes.
Was this a long time ago, or when did you all encounter child welfare services?
It was around November in 2007.
Okay, so about 7, 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. Okay, got you. Diane.
Yeah.
You there? You
Yeah.
okay? How you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so tell us, introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Diane Williams. I'm a mother of 1. I have a little girl. She's 3.
Anything else about you? What do you like to do, Diane?
Well, I like to do a lot, but I really don't do much anymore, since I don't have my baby. So,
how long has it been since your daughter has been in the system?
3 years.
3 years.
Almost 3 years.
3 years. Okay. So we want to talk about this and create a supportive space here.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Jackson, a couple years ago, 6, 7 years ago, your family was introduced to child welfare. What did you know about child welfare before your grandchildren became a part of the system?
I knew nothing of it. Nothing about it.
Nothing about it. Okay.
No.
Now, help me understand, what were some of the circumstances surrounding the removal of your grandchildren?
Well, my daughter was in a relationship with the guy, and she had 2 kids that wasn't his and 1 that was. Well, I found out that he was insecure with his relationship, so what he would do, they would get into it. He would beat her up. He would abuse her 2 sons. One particular day, she was late picking him up from work, I assume. He became upset. I tried to reach her over the phone with no answers, so I went to her apartment. I heard movement in there, but no one would come to the door. I left, and apparently he was upset. My daughter happened to call me like 2 days later, and she said, "Come and get me, hurry up, come and get me." So when I went to get my daughter, and when I pulled up, she was looking out a window. She ran outside, it was cold outside. It was in November, and she had the baby just with a receiving blanket and a little onesie on. And when she got in my car, I smelled something that didn't smell right, and I asked her, what was that? And she showed me, and he had abused her, burnt her. I took her to the hospital, and from there, I guess the hospital called child welfare. I don't know, but they showed up at my house with the police and everybody.
So you take your child and your grandbaby to the hospital so that your daughter could get medical attention.
Yes.
And in the process of your daughter getting medical attention, the grandbaby eventually was removed.
Correct.
Okay. Was the grandbaby abused?
No, he was not.
Okay, domestic violence is a big issue in our community, in a lot of our families.
Right.
Mary, were you aware that there was domestic violence going on in that home environment before this day?
No, I was not.
Okay. And it's not, do you believe that there was domestic violence, or do you believe that was the first incident?
No, I believe it.
You believe that it was domestic violence?
I believe it was domestic violence because one thing I did notice about her, she began to, when she moved out of my home and moved with him, she began to, like, cut herself off. You know, when she had two boys that was always at my house, she began to cut herself off and would keep the other two boys, or she would call and say, you can come and get the two boys. And, you know, it wasn't like she wanted to interact with us. And I'm like, okay, maybe she just wants time with this boyfriend and her new baby. And that's what I took it as.
So prior to child welfare getting involved, it sounds as if you've had a lot of frequent contact with your grandchildren.
Yes, I did.
Okay. So that was part of your normal routine. It was nothing abnormal. You know, no. There was a relationship established between you and your grandchildren. Okay. Now, with domestic violence, and maybe you can chime in, Dr. Smith, what some of the characteristics are that happen in domestic violence situations. She kind of talked about the isolation piece, you know, but are there other things or warning signs that somebody's daughter might be in a domestic violent relationship?
Yeah, well, the first one she just said, I think, is the biggest one. It's the isolation. And because what happens is if I can keep you isolated and keep you away from help, nobody knows because they're not talking to you. They can't see things. Inside of the isolation is now I can hide the black eyes. I can hide the verbal abuse because nobody sees that. Mm-hmm. So when you start looking at for some other telltale signs, so you look at the person and their personality. If a person's personality, they were once effervescent, gregarious, had this lively personality, but now you see them start to act a little bit different. You see them a little bit more isolated. You see them a little bit more depressed. You see them a little bit more quiet, withdrawn, and shy, and that's not their normal personality. Those are all telltale signs. When you start looking at when you have kind of a blended family in that section, if you can see some discrepancies on how people treat the biological child versus the other children that was in, and you look and see what the context of that relationship, if you see differences, you start to see strains within that relationship, and those are red flags. And, you know, what I do is I ask people, because even if somebody says no, you can hear something in their no, and that's one of the big reasons why people will isolate you, so you don't know what's going on with them. You can't see what's going on. But when we look at domestic violence, I always start to look at changes in what people wear. It's almost because those, again, hide marks. Right. If you see a person and you touch them and they're very sensitive to a jump, you get a hyper startled response. Somebody hollers, or you see them all of a sudden, just like I said, change their personality, where maybe now they're hollering at people and you say, wow, where did that come from? You see this bent up frustration that it gets a chance to get unleashed. Those are all kind of telltale signs. Everybody does things different. And the hardest part about domestic violence is because usually it's given by somebody who loves them. And so that's always the biggest thing, because inside of a domestic violence situation, you can have a perpetrator who is also very loving. And then you see those times where they are loving, and that also is what keeps that victim attached, because there is love attached to it. It's just a dysfunctional love, a love that can be deadly in the end. So sometimes we see that. What we can't do is be confused by love that we see, because we have to understand that love is also a side of that domestic violence. So you understand, seeing those great gifts given to a person. You know, you say, oh, wow, look at what she got her or what they did. Well, the question is, but maybe why did that person give that gift? Those type of things. So it's just like looking at the signs, and you can't know right away. And sometimes in retrospect, we say, wow, how couldn't I see this? And we beat ourselves up. But what we want to do is just to stay alert and attuned. But what Mary said is that isolation is the biggest thing. When they keep you away, you don't know what's going on. So what we want to do is make sure we gather them back in before they get too far out.
You know, and I think to add to that, because not only the person who is being victimized is experiencing this, but in this situation, the kids, their behaviors and everything else,
Amen.
Dr. Smith said, can start to change as well. So we want to keep that in mind, because those kids may start to eat differently, behave differently, act differently, and whatnot.
Sleep patterns can be
sleep
interrupted.
patterns, absolutely.
So Mary, before this day, you had no experience with child welfare. You didn't know that your daughter was in a domestic violence situation. She's burned. Goes to the doctor. They come to your home, child welfare, and I'm assuming your child was living with you at this time, your daughter.
No, my daughter was not living with me. She was living with him in her own place.
No, I mean when this event occurred, did she come and stay with you, and that's when child welfare came to your home, or
Yes,
how did they end up
yes.
at your house?
No, she came to live with me. When she left the hospital, I brought her back to my place.
Got you.
And then that's when all the people start coming.
So child welfare shows up at your door. They ring the doorbell and they say what?
They said they're there for my daughter, and they wanted to know who I was, and I told them who I was, and they came in with a couple. It was about five, 6 people.
5, 6 people.
Overwhelming, very overwhelming.
Very overwhelming.
Intimidating.
Very. Came in, talking, taking pictures, and then
Taking pictures of what? Was it pictures of your home, pictures of the children, taking pictures of what?
Taking pictures of of my daughter. It was detectives that was there.
Okay.
So they was taking pictures. They was talking. So with detectives, they was bringing in different ones, different detectives coming in because they was looking for the guy.
Okay.
And my daughter was not cooperative. So different people were coming trying to get her to cooperate. And then she finally cooperated with them.
Okay. So what were the grounds for removal of the child or the children?
The grounds, they said that she could not keep herself safe, nor could she keep the children safe.
So failure to protect.
Correct.
And there are a lot of mothers in our community. We've seen a number of child welfare referrals come up, and that's the very grounds or reasons why they will remove the child. Now, I've heard folks in the community say that they don't think that's fair. You know, if mom is in this domestic violence relationship, why does mom have to lose? And ultimately, your daughter end up losing her parental rights because when they remove a child and they go to court and it's determined that there was just cause to remove the kid and they need to be placed in foster care, there's typically a number of conditions that are given by the judge or ordered by the court that a parent has to follow through with. Diane, when your child was removed and you had to go to that whole court experience, did you have court order conditions as well? And
Yeah.
what were those conditions?
I had to do parenting classes, counseling. They wanted me to do evaluations with therapists, anger management, and stuff like that.
So there was a lot of services that you had to provide, that you had to do, and within a certain time frame. We often talk about that the ASFA, the Adoption Safe Family Act, which is basically if a child is in out-of-home care for 15 consecutive months out of 22, the county or whoever parties remove the children have to petition the state or the courts to terminate the parental rights of that parent, that legal guardian. So this timeline is going. So those conditions, did your daughter have conditions as well? And what were those conditions, Mary?
Yes, hers was the same.
They were the
my daughter was hard-headed because she felt like she didn't do anything to her children, so why are you guys taking my children and putting them in the system? Because she didn't do anything. So she would not comply with what they wanted her to do because she felt like she did not do anything for you to come and take her kids from her. It was done to her. She didn't do it.
And she has a valid point. We call that re-victimizing the victim, because it's just like from a child welfare standpoint, you cannot remove a child on grounds of poverty. So if there's an issue with excessive need from a financial standpoint, then help and assistance is given. But in this case, where Mary is right about her daughter being, very frustrated about a point, saying, I've never done anything to show myself not to be a good mother. Why are you treating me as though I did something correct? Now, in retrospect, some people say, why not just go through the classes? But for some people, it's a principle, a matter of the facts. And, hey, listen, I didn't do anything wrong. I needed help, and now you're punishing me. And when you take someone's children away, and we can see it, even here with Ms. Williams, it takes a lot out of a person. So when we start talking about what happens to a person when they're under domestic violence, well, now we're talking about an extreme grief with a person. One of those things is depression. And what depression is, I don't want to do anything. I don't even have the energy to move or talk, to brush my own teeth, to feed myself, more or less go under somebody who might not have the best intentions for me in their conversation.
Or understand where you're coming from.
And that kind of reminds me of what was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, Swiss psychiatrist, a psychologist who wrote a book back in 1969 about death and dying and the 5 stages of grief. And you talked about one of those stages being depression and how that can manifest itself. But what are some of those other stages, Dr. Ramel Smith, that you can share with us?
Yeah, when you first talk about Kubler-Ross on death and dying, what it is, it's not just a literal death, but any kind of death that we have that's kind of premature in life we don't think about. And the first stage, what she talked about that we all go through is denial. You hear people oftentimes say, you know what, it don't even feel like this happened. It's so surreal. It's like, what's going on? It's like your head is spinning. You haven't even kind of caught your breath around the situation. It's like, is this really going on? And then the second one is that anger, and this is what Mary was talking about, with her daughter. It's like, why are you doing this to me? I didn't do anything wrong. I was the one who was hurt. I was the one who did this. I did do something. I called my mom and got us out of there. I did everything that I could. So why are you, putting these things on me? So when you get a person who's angry, you get a person now who's thinking emotional, and they're not thinking as rational, and then we don't make the best decisions because it's kind of a gut instinct. The next stage is kind of a bargain, and then on death and dying, that's where a person might say, oh, Lord, if you please just let this person live. I do A, B, C, and D. Right. We make those kind of promises that we'll do whatever. And those sometimes, like even, with a person who said, I won't do A no more. You talk about domestic violence. If a person know the relationship is about to die, they try to bargain with the person who they've been victimized. And I promise I'll never do this to you again. You've been wanting to get married. Let me give you this ring. Let me do whatever. It's like that kind of sell job to whoever you need to sell it to. You think it can happen. And then the fourth stage is the one that we talked about, which was depression. And it's kind of a combination of all those things. I can't believe this has happened. I'm mad. I tried to make deals to do whatever I could, and then you just feel helpless. And we know that chronic depression is what leads to eventual suicide. So if we get caught up in that fourth stage, that depression, the death and dying becomes on the individual actually. But if we can get some healthy steps around, we can get an ideal of kind of coping with the situation, learning how to deal with the new normal, then we gradually move into the last stage, which is acceptance. And when we accept, that doesn't mean we like what's going on, but we have an understanding of the matter. We've kind of gotten adjusted and used to the new situation and learned to deal with it. But the thing about those stages, and we had talked about this, so I want to make sure we say it on air, we talked about it off air, was these stages aren't sequential and succinct. You can go through one and then regress back into another. Right. And because we all have triggers, we can think that we've accepted it, but then on a special day, a birthday, an anniversary, there's those triggers that elicit these different feelings. So it's a matter of going through these stages. But the one thing what we want to do is to be aware of where we're at, because if you are in that anger stage, that's when you realize you're snapping off on everybody. Anybody who come in, you're just blazing on them. So what you want to do is to be able to understand these stages for self-awareness and say, you know what? I am angry. Let me do what I need to do to calm down, to make sure I can move from my emotional brain to my rational brain so I can make the decisions that I need to make that's best for me and my loved ones involved. So for Mary's daughter case, it'd be like, you know what? I am the victim. I didn't do anything wrong. But if this is what I have to do in this unfair system to get my children, because you even heard Mary say, she said, my daughter was hard-headed. She didn't think she was being hard-headed, but, to the court cases, to the court system, she was, rebelling against the rules. So sometimes we had to swallow our pride in that sense. If you say, hey, you know what, I can take this loss for the greater win that's coming. And for a parent trying to get their child, you say, hey, ain't no mountain high enough, ain't no valley low enough. We do whatever it takes.
So let's talk to a parent who's sitting right here that's going through this right now today. What were the circumstances? You just give a little in terms of the circumstances around the removal of your child. How did you become introduced to child welfare?
It's about the same thing her daughter was going through, domestic violence with my daughter's father. The night they came and took my daughter, I actually wasn't at home when my daughter's father came and busted my window. We got there like a couple hours later, and like the next thing you know, CPS showed up at my door with the sheriffs, came to take my daughter. My daughter was like 8 months when this happened, and I had a lot of domestic violence going on back and forth with me and her daughter's father and stuff like that. But I was like just in the midst of like getting out of all of that. We were actually by my mom's house when all of this had happened, and they still removed my daughter from home.
And then they gave you these court-ordered conditions. So when we start talking about these different stages of grief, Dr. Smith talked about the denial or the shock stage, and there's the anger stage, there is the bargaining stage, depression stage, and then finally is the resolution or acceptance stage. Can you identify with any of those stages?
Yeah, I'm going through it right now. I'm very emotional about everything.
It's changed your life?
A lot.
When you were in this domestic violence situation, did you think that in any kind of way that the domestic violence situation could lead to the removal of your child?
No.
Okay. And it's important for mothers out there who are listening to this show, and fathers too, if you're in there's domestic violence in that home environment, that it could lead to your children becoming a part of the system that has not always produced favorable outcomes for the children or to the family. Ms. Jackson.
Yes.
So now you've been introduced to this big system. And we talked about the 5 stages of grief and how it impacts maybe the parents directly, but did you all have to deal with any type of any of these stages of grief? Did it impact you all as being extended family members?
Yes, it did. Me and my husband had to, the boys was always a part of our life. They always, was around. They was always around. From the day they born, the first 2 was. When the CPS came and we got involved in child welfare, and they began to do a background check on us, me and my husband had to get a divorce.
Wait a minute, you said you and your husband had to get a divorce. Why did you have to get a divorce?
Because they said my husband had a charge on him when he was 17.
And how old was he at the time when all this happened? When CPS got involved, how old was he at that point?
50, I want to say 52, 53.
52, 53. So there was a charge or conviction from when he was 17, well over 30-some years ago.
Yes, and then they said there was another charge when there was a tussle with a gun, and it went off and struck a person in the lower leg. And they said that's a permanent bar.
And that's a permanent bar. And this was going back to 2007, 2008. And so your husband had some conviction or trouble from when he was a younger man, or a youth at the time.
Yes, he was a youth.
And so that became a bar or prevented you both from adopting. And so you end up having. And how long were you all married at the time that you had to get a divorce?
30 years.
30 years. 30 years. Now, and this is both of your grandchildren?
Yes.
Both of the grandchildren. How did you come up with that idea? I mean, because a lot of people we don't think about that is an option. And we see a lot of children who are just adopted also. Eventually somebody told you all that you all would not be a candidate for adoption because of this background. How did you come up with that?
There was a worker that we had. And when they found out that we could not get the boys out the system, this worker came and told me the only way you will be able to get them, you have to divorce him. She told me I can get them, but I couldn't be married to him.
Your husband of 30 years, you cannot be married to the grandfather of your grandchildren if you were to adopt with
Correct.
him. What did you think when that proposal was made to you? What did you and your husband think?
well, these people crazy.
I was just saying. I was thinking in my mind that's ludicrous. He was able to be the grandparent for all these years. It was no issue, and then you want to get him in, and so you want to weaken the family structure.
So that's that whole eligibility criteria. That is really deep. It's almost unbelievable. And in the state, you're saying the folk who worked with the state, whether they were state workers or whether they were a contracted agency, but somebody that has a prime role on this team approach you and say that the only way that you'll be able to adopt your grandchildren if you were to divorce your husband of 30 years, and
Yes.
you got the divorce.
Yes, the state paid for it.
Who paid for
Say
it?
that again.
The state.
What state? Because this is not happening in America.
Yes, it is. Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wisconsin paid for the divorce. Yes, they did.
How did that impact you? I mean, because I almost need to go to a commercial break because that's unbelievable. I can't believe that the state of Wisconsin or whomever government officials would pay for your divorce, would suggest a divorce, and then pay for the divorce.
Yes, they did. They did.
How did that impact or affect your relationship with your daughter?
It made me look at her like, I have to do all of this to keep my grandchildren, your children that you gave life to. I have to divorce your father to keep them, which we had decided we was not going to let our grandchildren, get put in the system. Because at that time, she started out, she had 3, and she was pregnant with her 4th. So she had 4 kids. We was not going to let those 4 boys get away in the system because they already had told us that, well, the 2 oldest ones would be split up and put into different homes. The 2 youngest ones, the babies they would go up north and be placed up north.
So
And
2 of the younger ones will be placed up north.
Yes.
Do you think that's a common thing when they're removing infants and young children, removing them from the community and placing them outside the community?
That's crazy.
Did they put any restrictions on your husband after divorce as far as being able to see the
Visitation,
children with
right.
visitation, things of that nature?
No, sir.
Miss Williams,
That makes even less sense.
where's your daughter at right now today?
My daughter
No,
is,
just one second, Miss Jackson. Miss Williams, where's your daughter at today?
My daughter she's in Wisconsin. She's staying like in the West Allis area or Waukesha area.
Is she in an African American home?
No.
Now, you've been expressing for 3 years that you wanted your mother to be the adoptive resource for your child if your rights were terminated. And
Yeah.
how has that been working out?
It's like they just look over everything that I say when I bring up my mom. It's like they just pay no attention to it. They always be like, "Oh, she's well taken care of where she at. The people that she with,
She's
they're
bonded with them.
this, they're that. You know, they're firefighters. They're this, they're that. I don't care about any of that. My mom, she has a very good job. She, things like that. Why can't she go with my mom?" And they just always be like, "Well, we have to look into that. We have to look into that. We have to go through so much to look into it," but years later, it's still never looked into.
And I have to say this. I was just witnessing a conversation between Miss Williams and her attorney and just how these folks talk to people. There's something really wrong with that, because you're just trying to find out the name of some other principal parties on your case, like the judge, and you want, there's communication because she's trying to communicate to her attorney, but the attorney is blocking everything. And the thing that Ms. Williams says, she just felt like they're all working together. We
Against her.
Against her, not for her, not in a true partnership. So, and it kind of reminds me of something, Ms. Jackson, you had mentioned the other day when you talked about, the exchange between you and the child welfare folks, how they would just, hold this threat over your head about if you don't do X, Y, Z, we're going to take your children and send them up north.
yes.
How do you all deal with that?
It's hard. It's like with another incident, like with my my daughter's grandmother on her dad's side. Like they made her do so much to try to get her adoption license. They made her go through so many loops to tell her when she's almost done with it that she's doing it for nothing.
Now, who was this person?
This is my daughter's father, mom.
So they did look at the paternal side of the family.
Yeah.
Okay. So they looked at the paternal side of the family and said, okay, but what were the grounds or the reasons specifically that they expressed to you, said that your mother is not a viable resource, placement option, an adoptive resource for this child? Because there's federal law, and I'm going to cite that federal law in a few minutes. So can you tell me what was the express reason that your attorney, that the judge, that the guardian ad litem who works in the best interest of the child, what did they tell you as it relates to why your mother is not a resource?
They said my mama did something that I don't really recall, remember, or anything. You know, I don't remember nothing.
So there was an allegation that was made against your mother, but was it substantiated? Meaning, was it proven?
No.
So it wasn't proven, and you've informed them that this didn't happen, and they're using that as a barrier?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, we got some. If we got about 15 minutes, 20 minutes on the show, if you'd like to call 414-444-5250, 414-444-5250, I want to kind of talk about Dr. Smith, because Mary Jackson talked about when this process started with child welfare that her daughter had 2 children, and eventually, did she have 2 or 3 children, Mary?
She had 3.
She had 3, but then she had another child. Did she have a child by the same guy?
She was pregnant when he abused her.
Okay, I got you. Okay. So now there's 4 child. There's this thing where some mothers of all race ethnicities, where we've seen where when they're going through these 5 stages of grief, part of that depression piece or resolution piece is, you know what, I can't get this child back or these children back, and then they'll become pregnant again. And some of them with the idea or thinking that if you take this child, they can have these children, but they can't take this one. Dr. Smith, what is going on there from a psychological standpoint? What is their mental how they're processing?
You can never replace a child, but it is a replacement in a sense. It's because it's a hole in your heart. It's a place where you said, hey, you know what? I want to do some things where I want to love this child. I want to give this child my all. When your child is taken away from you, you say, you know what? If you're at the point where you have the ability to make another child, you make another child, and you say, you know what, I'm going to take care of this child. And sometimes you even see it with some older fathers, you know, like you say, it's almost like a do-over. Say, I didn't do right by these earlier children, but I'm going to do right by this child. And say, you know I made some mistakes, and I'm going to still try to get these other kids back, but I'm going to do right by this one. And then a lot of times it is an earnest thought. It is a sincere thought. And you can't sterilize people. You know, that's going back to like the eugenics movements when you talk about negative eugenics and population control, where they would try to sterilize different populations that they didn't want or think needed to repopulate. So we have to be very, very careful with, you know, talking on that issue. The only thing what was frustrating with child
welfare,
the child welfare system, but with birth control and all of these things, as we talk about parenting. You see them say, you heard Diane say, where they said, well, my boyfriend's mother couldn't get it. My mother couldn't get it. We hear Mary talk about her husband, about something that he did before. Well, all these people were qualified to have children originally.
Right.
But now when something happened, now when we reevaluate them, all of a sudden they're not good. And that's the most frustrating part about it. So when we talk about what we need to do as far as this thing is, like, there need to be parenting classes way beforehand and whatnot. But when needs to go to your point with the mothers, though, it's a replacement clause. It's like, hey, you know what? You've taken this away from me. So you know what I want to do? I want something else. In a love game, we call it a rebound. You know, so this your rebound love. It's like takes your mind off of the hurt and pain from the other one. And it doesn't do it totally, but it does do it in some sense.
Now, according to the Child Welfare Information Gateway, in order for states like Wisconsin to receive federal payments for foster care and adoption assistance, federal law under Title 4E of the Social Security Act requires that they consider, and I'm quoting, consider giving preference to an adult relative over a non-relative caregiver when determining placement for a child, provided that the relative caregiver meets all relevant state child protection standards. Title 4E further requires states to exercise due diligence to identify and provide notice to all grandparents and other adult relatives of the child. With that being said, it's my understanding that we have a call-in guest. Diane's mom is on the line. Good afternoon, Diane, mom.
Hi.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Good afternoon. Thank you for calling Fresh Start today. Your daughter is here in the studio, and we're talking about a very real issue for you and your family. You've been dealing with child welfare for 3 years.
Yeah.
It's my understanding that you have expressed that you wanted to be an adoptive resource for your grandchild in the event that your grandchild's mother rights were terminated.
Yes, I did.
Who did you express that to?
Everybody. Not the judge, but the lawyer, the case manager, everybody that I can talk to, I was calling.
And what is your understanding in terms of why you are not a valuable or viable resource?
They said some kind of allegations that wasn't proven.
Some kind of allegations that weren't proven.
Yeah. They said that someone called Shotwell for me before, and they came up to my house one time. They came in, they looked around, checked my kids, and they left and never came back.
They left and never came back. And typically, Mr. Roby does licensing for this agency, so I'm sure that he can.
Yeah, and what we've done in the past, and we actually spoke about this last week, when there's a screen in or a screen out, there's many times if someone, whether a neighbor, a teacher, or any other mandated reporter, or just somebody who is upset at someone can call in to 220-SAFE and make an allegation against somebody. And if it's not screened in, most people never know about it. And so people can have a variety of screen out investigations on.
But screen in, so say it's screened in and they do an investigation. Mm-hmm. It can come back unsubstantiated, meaning they've looked into the details. Right. There was not enough evidence to substantiate that abuse or neglect or something happened. So in your case, Ms. Diane, with this 3-year-old precious baby, there was an allegation made. They didn't do a thorough investigation, or they didn't screen it in, meaning they didn't investigate it, but there's nothing in documentation showing that you were a perpetrator of some type of abuse or neglect.
No.
Okay. Now, let me ask you and the other grandmother. So we got 2 grandmothers on the phone line. Mary.
Yes.
In both of your cases, Diane and Mary and Diane Mom, how many case managers were on your case? Your case, Mary Jackson, was 5 years. So in the course of the 5 years, how many case managers did you have on your case?
6.
6. Diane, how many case managers have you had on yours?
Diane Mom. I only had 1.
You've had 1 so far?
No, 2.
You've had 2.
Oh, 2.
So you've had 2. And Mary Jackson, having this high turnover of case managers working with you, how does that impact the outcomes of a case from what you saw? What did it do to your family?
It interrupted my family because you got all these. You with the worker. You kind of get comfortable with this worker, from them coming in. Then all of a sudden they come and say, "Well, this is going to be my last month, and I'm going to bring somebody else along with me to, for you to meet." And then me and my husband were still married at the time. We're looking at one another like, how many more people are going to come in the house?
Right.
Because my husband comes from a large family, and it's basically male. And, like, if some of the brothers was at the house, the worker want to know, who is he? Then you got to explain this one to this worker. Then now you get a new worker, and then you got to go over the same process with this worker. Well, I have a lot of in-laws. I have a large family, so people will be coming in and out because they know what happened. And you get tired of repeating the same thing over and over to different people because they switching up.
And,
I think your life.
And I think with that, when you talk about trust, if you're trying to build a relationship with somebody, and whether it's 3 months, 6 months, and all of a sudden they're gone, and now you got to, as Grandma mentioned, you got to now repeat this process, that can really cause a lot of stress and friction on the entire family unit.
So Diane, Mom and Diane, this has been going on for about 3 years, and we talked about that federal clock that's ticked, that ASFA, Adoption Safe Family Act. At some point or stage of a case, the system moves to terminate the parental rights. Where are you all at on that track? Where are you all at?
Well, I'm at TPR.
You're at TPR.
Yeah.
And so the TPR phase lasts about 6 months. Is that something? I mean, is there a chance for you to get your children or to retain your parental rights at this point?
Well, they say it's not, but I feel in my heart that it's way around everything because I really want my baby back.
And you've done everything. You've been cooperative based on what you're saying. You've gone to the parenting classes, the supervised visits. You've done the anger management class.
Yeah.
You've done individual therapy.
Yeah.
You've cooperated with them. And you still can't get your baby back.
No.
And they won't give the child to your mother.
No.
I'm just curious. That family out in Waukesha or West Dallas, have they been identified as an adoptive resource?
Yes.
See, now that's the problem.
That's why. Mm-hmm.
So do you feel that the system has aligned themselves with these other people, and no matter what you've done, it's just not good enough?
Yes.
So if there's anybody that's out there, listen, I want you to call me. If you have any type of suggestion or resources, call me at 414-351. Matter of fact, I'm going to give you my cell number, 414-333-3372. Because I hear too many cases like this, and there are some folk that couldn't even come on the show today because we just don't have enough microphones. This is not an isolated case. There are too many young mothers and grandmothers and grandfathers that's going through this situation that is being discussed today. And we want to try to get as much support. Now, you can't call me right now because I see my phone blowing up. You can't call me right now. Call me after 4 p.m. Because I'm really concerned about how your attorney was talking to you when you're just asking some basic questions.
Right.
Now, I'm not the type of person that call people name out, but I do call people names out. Yes. So, Miss Williams' mom, Diane Williams' mom.
Yes.
How have you been dealing with this emotionally and psychologically, and how have you been able to support your daughter through this?
I mean, I supported the best I can. Basically, I moved out of town because I couldn't take it no more.
So you uprooted. We got one family who had to divorce each other after 30 years. We have you moved out of town because you just couldn't witness it. It was doing too much.
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Smith, you got to help us in terms of what are some coping strategies for families who are dealing with the system? What are some things that we can do to try to maintain our sanity?
I mean, let's just be real. The system is not fair, and so that's the first thing we have to deal with. We have the literature in front of us. You just read the statute. They have little caveats, little different technicalities to be able to move against the law. You notice the word consider. So a judge will say, I did consider, and I moved on. And they'll tell you that frank. But what we have to do is we can't give up hope. You hear Sister Diane right here, and you hear the passion in her voice, and you see her still after 3 years still going and going and going. What we have to do is unite as a community. We have to pray. We have to uplift each other up. But I don't want to be unrealistic and say, hey, there's something to do because this is painful and it hurts. And what we have to do is, one, just be real and acknowledge that pain. And then, two, what we have to do is everything that we possibly can do. We understand that we can't control all the situations, but when everything is said and done, you understand it, because the truth of the reality is we've heard these stories way too many times, and we've seen it end in fashions in which we're not happy with, in which infuriates us. And so you say, well, what do? All you can do is hope and give everything you have until there's no reason to be able to do that. And then even when that child is 18, is try to establish relationships with the adoptive family if possible, be able to continue some type of relationship. And so when the child is 18, he can make other decisions. Those things can happen. But the honest truth is, when you're going through this right now, it's nothing anybody can say to you. It's nothing anybody can do to console you at moments in time. It's just going to be those times where it's difficult. But that's why it is important for us to have circles of love around us, because if me and you are together and you having a down time, maybe I can hold you up. And then next week I might need you to hold me up. So what we have to do is remember the people, and this is sometimes what happens, the people who are on our side, because we are all angry, we're frustrated, we start fighting with each other. So we got to remember who we're in this with. We got to remember to love each other during those tough times and make sure we're a resource, because the truth of the matter is we're fighting against an enemy that's posing as a friend.
You know, it's really important, I think, to add to that, you know, a support system. Building a circle of support like you talked about, Dr. Smith. Diane, I have never walked in your shoes. I don't know what it's like to have had your child removed and then it seemed like you can't get your kid back no matter how you try to work with the system is not working for you. But I do think some things is real. You got to watch your diet. You've got circle of influence, a circle of support. Find some other mothers who are going through the same situation and how they're dealing with it. Therapy and counseling is therapeutic, you know. Those things are really important. Taking care of yourself the best way that you can. Reading, researching the internet, getting information. Make phone calls. Don't be afraid to get, and I'm going to say something that a lot of folks don't like, but if there really is an injustice that's being done to you or to a collective group of people, contact media. People don't like to go that route, you know, but sometimes I think situations call for extreme measures. We're not talking about people who are losing their cars and losing, you know, their license and losing a relationship with a boyfriend, girlfriend. We're talking about people who are losing their children. Miss Williams, my question for you is, did you have a relationship with your granddaughter, a close relationship with your granddaughter before all of this happened?
Oh, my God, did I? I mean, she was with me all the time.
And see, that's the thing that the courts do look at in terms of what was that relationship like between the grandparents and the grandchild to determine whether or not it's in the best interest to disrupt a placement over there with non-relatives to place with a grandparent. Now, I do want to say that in all cases, or before a child can be placed in the home of a relative, the child placing agency must do an assessment to determine that the relative is fit and willing to provide a suitable placement for the child. Did they conduct any kind of assessment on you, Miss Diane? Mom.
No.
They didn't?
No.
This is really deep. I would say get in contact with your legislators in the state of Wisconsin. Pull them into this battle. There's Senator Lena Taylor. There's State Representative LaTanya Johnson. There is...
I'll be talking to Lena Taylor.
Oh, you've been talking to Sister Taylor? Okay.
Yeah, that's how we got your number.
That's how y'all got my number? Okay. Well, great. Thanks a lot, Lena Taylor. We're going to work on this. We're going to look into this because something, just as they say, doesn't seem right about this case. And it's really important to know. And this is what I'm going to say to all of you folks out there who have a open child welfare case. Know the names, the role of everybody that's on your case. That's really important to know those names. Yes.
And it's so hard to figure things out because it's like they block you out of everything. You know what I mean? They don't give me no names, no numbers to anything. You know, I could leave a message with my worker right now. She won't get back with me until probably till my case is over with. You know, it takes her months, weeks to get back with me, to talk to me or anything. Do
you go up to the supervisor?
Yes.
And listen, don't stop at the supervisor.
And I go above the supervisor, and then I get to the point where I go to client's rights specialist, and it's just still, I feel like nothing is being done. Nobody is hearing me.
Okay, that client's rights specialist, because they used to have an ombudsman office, but there's something about that. I'm going to do a show about that whole, the agreement house, client's rights, with that whole piece, because you're right, you're not getting a response.
And I've been beating myself up for 3 years, and I'm tired of going through this. I just want my baby so I can just move on with my life.
Okay.
And, you know, we've talked about this before. You know, that's what the system does. They try to beat you down till you are tired and you want to give up. And that's why I said, you know, we just got to keep the hope. And, you know, it's like all of the things we can say, you know, you already know to do, but you just can't stop. And we're going to put out some resources for you today so you too have some things maybe that you didn't have before in your corner.
And, you know, I think to add to that, Jermaine mentioned, make sure you know everyone's role and name on your case. But I think also make sure for all families out there, get everything in writing that workers, supervisors, judges, everybody tells you. Get it in writing.
I mean, I begged the people for 2 years to let me see my granddaughter, and she wouldn't. And I begged her, 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 and I begged her And
You said what now? I'm sorry, Diane. I didn't catch it. What'd you say?
Diane's mom. I begged them for 2 years to let me see my granddaughter, and they wouldn't. I had to literally have my daughter's her lawyer to subpoena me to court. They wouldn't even let me show up in court. I mean, I had to have her subpoena me to court, and I had to literally say I'm going to go and ask the judge, can I see my granddaughter? Oh no, it's not a problem for you to see her. You can see her. Matter of fact, you can see her Thursday.
You know, the interesting thing from what I observed today, it does seem like there is a barrier where, you know, and I've seen this, you know, working in child welfare, it seems like folks do not want parents to contact the judge.
And it's like, I'm supposed to do a lot with my daughter. You know, I'm supposed to attend doctor visits. I'm supposed to attend all of that. You know, they don't let me know nothing about nothing. Like, I miss, they didn't even let me see my baby for her birthday. And they lied and said she was sick. And my baby said, Mama, no, I did not eat cake for my birthday. My baby, you know, I was supposed to spend that day.
So they systematically lock parents out. And then they terminate the rights. This is something that's terribly wrong about that. But we're going to work with you and try to get you some help and some support. I'm going to have to do some more research because what I hear here is your side. Respectfully, I hear your side. So I need to be looking at what other folks' position is and why, so we can figure out how, as a community, we can support you and your mother and your child. All right. Thank you all for tuning in to Fresh Start. Mr. Rogan, resources, where can people go?
We just got a call. Someone indicated that families can contact Legal Action of Wisconsin, and that phone number is 414-278-7722. Also, providers or families can go out to Children's Court and file a motion so families can speak directly to the judge. So we just got that information sent to us. But also, the kinship care specialist for the state of Wisconsin is Holly Telfer, and she can be reached directly at 608-422-6921.
Well, now, what's legal action number again?
414-278-7722.
So if parents, I don't know if that's grandparents, but if legal guardians want to speak directly with the judge on a case, they can go file a motion. Now, I don't know if that means their attorney can assist them in filing the motion, or how easy, or is there any support? Can legal action support filing a motion for you to go speak with the judge? That's what we want to kind of look into tomorrow, Ms. Williams. That's what we're going to do tomorrow, okay? We're going to see what we can do to get you in the presence of the judge so you can tell your story. All right? Thank you all for tuning in to Fresh Start today. You all be well, be safe until next week. We'll be back.